The air in the Blue Ridge Mountains carried a crisp bite, even in late summer as the sun dipped below the ridgeline, casting long shadows over the dense forest. The scent of pine and damp earth hung heavy, mingling with the faint smoke from a distant campfire. The Shenandoah Valley stretched out below, a patchwork of green and gold, serene and untouched, yet there was a quiet menace in the way the wind hissed through the towering pines. It was a place that felt alive, ancient and secretive, a sanctuary for those who sought solace in its trails and a labyrinth for those who didn't respect its depths. Lila Harper, 29, stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, her hiking boots crunching against the stones as she adjusted the straps of her backpack. Her auburn hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and her hazel eyes sparkled with anticipation. She was the unofficial leader of the group, the one who'd planned this weekend retreat to a rented cabin nestled deep in the mountains. Lila was no stranger to these woods. She'd been hiking the Appalachian Trail since she was a teenager, her love for the outdoors rooted in childhood summers spent camping with her father. She'd always said the forest was where she felt most herself, where the chaos of her marketing job in Richmond melted away under the canopy of leaves. Her three best friends, gathered on the cabin's porch, were less seasoned but eager. Sarah, the practical one, was double-checking their cooler of supplies, her blonde bob swaying as she muttered about forgetting bug spray. Mia, the group's dreamer, was snapping photos of the sunset with her phone, her dark curls bouncing as she spun to capture every angle. Anne Claire, the quiet one, sat on the porch steps, sketching the ridgeline in her notebook, her glasses slipping down her nose. They'd been friends since college, bonded by late-night study sessions and shared dreams of escaping the city. This trip was their chance to reconnect, to laugh and unplug in a place where cell service was spotty at best. The cabin itself was a rustic gem, all weathered logs and wide windows, perched on a slope overlooking a narrow valley. It was remote, 2 miles from the nearest neighbor, a retired couple who kept to themselves, and a good hour's drive from the closest town. The isolation was part of the appeal. Lila had found the listing online, charmed by its promise of uninterrupted nature. The group had arrived that morning, piling out of Sarah's SUV with duffel bags and playlists, ready for 3 days of hiking, wine and stargazing. Last hike before dinner? Lila called, her voice bright but firm, like a camp counselor rallying her charges. She'd mapped out a 4-mile loop to a nearby overlook, promising a view that would make you forget the world exists. The others groaned playfully but agreed, grabbing their water bottles and pulling on light jackets. The trailhead was just 100 yards from the cabin, marked by a faded wooden sign that read Ravens Point Loop. They set off single file, Lila in the lead, her stride confident as she navigated the uneven path. The trail wound through thickets of rhododendron and past granite outcrops, the forest floor soft with pine needles. The air grew cooler as they descended into a shaded hollow, the sound of a distant stream mingling with their chatter. Mia was recounting a disastrous date, her voice animated, while Sarah teased her about her taste in men. Claire, as usual, listened more than she spoke, her eyes scanning the ferns and moss-covered rocks. They reached the overlook in under an hour, a rocky clearing with a panoramic view of the valley. The sky was a blaze of orange and pink, the mountains folding into each other like waves frozen in time. Lila stood at the edge, hands on her hips, her face lit with a quiet pride. "Worth it, right?" she said, turning to her friends. "Totally," Mia said, snapping another photo. Sarah nodded, catching her breath, while Claire sketched the horizon, her pencil moving in quick, precise strokes. They lingered until the light began to fade, the temperature dropping sharply. Lila checked her watch. "We should head back. It's getting dark and I don't want to be out here with just flashlights." The group agreed and they started the return leg, the trail now cloaked in twilight. Lila led again, her pace steady, but as they neared the halfway point she paused, tilting her head. "You hear that?" she asked, her voice low. The others stopped, listening. The forest was silent except for the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of insects. "What?" Sarah whispered, her brow furrowing. Lila frowned, scanning the trees. "Thought I heard something, like footsteps." She shook her head, laughing softly. "Probably just a deer. Come on." They continued, but the mood had shifted. The forest felt heavier now, the shadows deeper. Mia kept glancing over her shoulder, and Claire's sketching hand stilled, her eyes darting to the underbrush. Sarah stayed close to Lila, her usual pragmatism tinged with unease. Back at the cabin, they kicked off their boots and collapsed onto the couches, the tension easing as they opened a bottle of wine. Lila was her usual self again, joking about Mia's city girl nerves and planning the next day's hike. They ate pasta and laughed until midnight, the fire crackling in the stone hearth. When they finally went to bed, the cabin was warm and quiet, the only sound the wind outside. The next morning, Sarah woke first, the smell of coffee pulling her from sleep. She expected to find Lila in the kitchen as she'd promised to make breakfast, but the room was empty. The coffee pot was cold, the counters untouched. Sarah checked the living room, then the porch, her unease growing. "Lila?" she called, her voice echoing in the still morning air. Mia and Claire joined her, bleary-eyed but alert as Sarah's tone sharpened. They searched the cabin. Lila's bed was unmade, her hiking boots and backpack gone. Her phone was on the nightstand, plugged in and fully charged, which was odd. Lila never went anywhere without it, especially not on a hike. "She might have gone for a quick walk," Mia suggested, but her voice lacked conviction. Claire pointed to the trailhead sign visible through the window. "She wouldn't go far without telling us." Sarah's stomach knotted as she stepped outside, scanning the gravel driveway. Lila's car was still there, parked next to hers, the keys on the kitchen counter. They called her name again, their voices swallowed by the vastness of the forest. No response. The three women exchanged glances, a shared dread settling in. They split up to check the nearby trails, shouting for Lila as they went. Sarah took the path to Raven's Point, Mia checked the streamside trail, and Claire circled the cabin's perimeter. An hour later they regrouped, breathless and empty-handed. Sarah's hands shook as she dialed 911, the signal weak but just enough to connect. "Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office," a calm voice answered. "My friend's missing," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "We're at a cabin off Route 612. She went hiking maybe early this morning and she's not back. Her stuff's here but she's gone." The dispatcher asked for details, Lila's description, her last known location, what she was wearing. Sarah described Lila's green jacket, black leggings, and the small silver necklace she always wore, a gift from her father. The dispatcher promised to send deputies and a ranger team, but the wait felt endless. By noon, the driveway was crowded with vehicles. 2 sheriff's cars, a park ranger's truck, and a handful of volunteers from the nearby town. Deputy Matt Coleman, a wiry man with a weathered face, took charge, his notepad already filled with notes. He questioned the women, his tone professional but gentle, as they recounted the previous day's hike and Lila's habits. Ranger Emily Torres, who knew the area's trails better than anyone, studied a topographic map, marking potential search zones. "She's an experienced hiker," Sarah said, her voice tight. "She wouldn't just get lost." Coleman nodded, his expression unreadable. "We'll start with the Ravens Point loop and fan out from there. Any chance she mentioned going somewhere else?" The women shook their heads. Mia clutched Lila's phone as if it might ring with answers. Claire's hands twisted in her lap, her sketchbook forgotten. The search team mobilized, K9 units sniffing Lila's jacket for a scent, their handlers calling commands. A helicopter buzzed overhead, its blades chopping the air. As the day wore on, the volunteers found something. A single black shoelace caught in a bramble near the trail's halfway point. Sarah's heart leapt, then sank. It was Lila's from her hiking boots, but nothing else was nearby. No footprints, no blood, no signs of a struggle. The shoelace felt like a cruel tease, a fragment of Lila left behind in a sea of trees. By dusk, the search had covered 5 miles of trails and found nothing more. The women sat on the cabin's porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the team's return. Deputy Coleman approached, his face grim. "We're not giving up," he said. "But this forest is huge. We'll keep going tomorrow." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Mia was crying softly, and Claire stared at the darkening woods as if willing Lila to emerge. The mountains loomed around them, beautiful and silent, their secrets buried deep. Somewhere out there was Lila, or whatever was left of her. The Blue Ridge Mountains woke under a veil of mist, the air thick with the scent of wet pine and moss. The sun struggled to pierce the canopy, casting dappled light on the forest floor where search teams gathered at dawn. The cabin, once a cozy retreat, now felt like a command post, its porch cluttered with topographic maps, radios, and coffee thermoses. The hum of urgency replaced the quiet of the previous morning, but the vastness of the Shenandoah Valley loomed as a silent adversary, its ridges and hollows swallowing sound and hope alike. Sarah stood at the edge of the driveway, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. She clutched Lila's silver necklace, which she'd found tucked in her friend's backpack, its delicate chain a reminder of Lila's absence. Mia paced nearby, her phone useless without signal, her usual chatter replaced by a nervous silence. Claire sat cross-legged on the grass, her sketchbook open but untouched, her gaze fixed on the trailhead where Lila had last been seen. The three women were tethered by a shared dread, each grappling with the question no one dared voice. What if Lila was gone for good? Deputy Matt Coleman orchestrated the search with a calm intensity, his radio crackling as he coordinated teams. Ranger Emily Torres, her dark braid swinging as she moved, briefed the volunteers, local hikers, firefighters, and a few off-duty park staff. The search and rescue operation was massive, with over 50 people spread across the Ravens Point Loop and surrounding trails. K-9 units, led by a handler named Tom and his German Shepherd, Rusty, sniffed Lila's green jacket, their noses low to the ground. A drone buzzed overhead, its camera scanning the dense forest for any sign of movement or color that didn't belong. Focus on the primary trail first, Torres instructed, pointing to a map pinned to a folding table. Lila's an experienced hiker, so she likely stuck to marked paths. But we can't rule out a fall or disorientation. Check ravines, clearings, anything off-trail within a mile. Sarah hovered near the map, her fingers tracing the winding lines. She knew this trail, she said, her voice hoarse. She's hiked it before. She wouldn't just wander off. Torres nodded, her expression sympathetic but focused. We're covering all possibilities. Accidents happen even to pros. Or maybe she stopped to rest and got turned around. The search began at first light, teams fanning out in a grid pattern. Volunteers called Lila's name, their voices echoing through the trees, answered only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional caw of a crow. The K-9 units led the charge, Rusty pulling Tom toward a narrow path where the black shoelace had been found the day before. The shoelace, now bagged as evidence, was their only clue, its frayed end a haunting hint of Lila's passage. Sarah had stared at it for hours the previous night, willing it to reveal more, but it remained stubbornly silent. By mid-morning, the teams had covered 3 miles of the loop without success. The terrain was unforgiving, steep inclines, rocky outcrops, and thick underbrush that snagged clothing and slowed progress. The drone footage showed nothing but endless green, the forest a labyrinth that seemed to mock their efforts. Coleman, sweat beading on his brow, conferred with Torres near a stream bed, their voices low but urgent. We're expanding to the secondary trails, Coleman said, marking new zones on the map. If she went off-path, we need to check the hollow's water sources too. She might have headed for a stream. Torres frowned, studying the map. This area's got old logging roads, some unmapped. If she got lost, she could have followed one thinking it led back. The morning brought a flicker of hope when a volunteer, a local named Greg, radioed in from a ridge a mile from the trailhead. Found something, he said, his voice staticky but excited. Looks like a water bottle half buried in the dirt. Sarah's heart leapt as she and the others rushed to the site, a muddy clearing where the trail dipped into a shallow valley. The bottle was Lila's, a blue Nalgene with a sticker of a mountain silhouette, one she'd carried on every hike. It was scuffed, its cap missing, but it was undeniably hers. Mia knelt beside it, tears welling, while Claire's hands trembled as she sketched the scene, as if drawing could anchor her to reality. It's hers, Sarah said to Coleman, her voice shaking. She was here. Coleman nodded, his face unreadable as he bagged the bottle. It's a good find. Helps us narrow the search. But it's strange, why's it half buried? Could have been dropped and covered by debris or... He didn't finish, but the unspoken possibilities hung heavy. The team scoured the clearing, searching for footprints or signs of a struggle, but the ground was too dry, the pine needles too thick. Rusty circled the area, nose to the ground, but the scent trail faded at the edge of the clearing, as if Lila had vanished into the air. The discovery electrified the search, volunteers doubling their efforts. A second drone was deployed, and a helicopter swept low over the valley, its roar shaking the trees. By afternoon, they'd extended the radius to 5 miles, checking streams, cliffs, and abandoned cabins. The women stayed close to the command post, answering questions about Lila's habits, her fitness, her state of mind. Had she seemed upset? Was she meeting someone? Sarah bristled at the implications, her voice sharp. She was happy, she said. This was her happy place. She wasn't running from anything. Mia nodded, clutching Lila's phone, which she'd kept charged in case it held clues. She was planning our next trip already. She wouldn't just leave. Claire, quieter, added, she always said the woods made her feel free. But she was careful. She knew the risks. Coleman listened, jotting notes, his eyes scanning the women's faces. We're not assuming anything yet. Could be an injury, a fall, or she got turned around. We'll keep looking. But as the day wore on, the initial surge of hope faded. The water bottle was their only lead, and it raised more questions than answers. Why was it buried? Where was Lila's backpack, her jacket, her other boot? The forest seemed to taunt them, its beauty a cruel facade. Volunteers returned to the cabin at dusk, their faces etched with exhaustion. Rusty lay panting at Tom's feet, his ears drooping. That night, the women sat in the cabin's living room, the fire unlit, the silence oppressive. Sarah held Lila's necklace, her thumb tracing its curves. "She's out there," she whispered, more to herself than the others. "She has to be." Mia scrolled through photos on her phone, pausing on one of Lila at the overlook, her smile wide against the sunset. What if she's hurt? What if she's... She couldn't finish. Claire closed her sketchbook, her voice barely audible. The forest is too big. It's like it swallowed her. The next morning brought a new lead, this one from a hiker who'd been on a parallel trail the day Lila disappeared. He reported seeing a pickup truck parked near a service road, its driver, a man in a flannel shirt, watching the trailhead. The description was vague, the truck's license plate unnoted, but it was enough to send a team to the service road. They found tire tracks, fresh but unremarkable, and no other evidence. Coleman's jaw tightened as he relayed the news. "It's something," he said, "but it's not enough. We'll run it down, check local vehicles, but it could be nothing." Sarah's frustration boiled over. "Nothing? That's all we've got, nothing. A shoelace, a bottle, a truck that might not mean anything. She's gone and we're just chasing ghosts." Torres placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, her voice steady. "We're doing everything we can. This terrain, it's tough. But we're not stopping." The search continued for 3 more days, each one a blur of shouts, helicopter rotors, and fruitless sweeps. The volunteers dwindled as hope faded, replaced by a grim determination. The women took turns joining the teams, calling Lila's name until their voices cracked. By the 5th day the official search was scaled back, the helicopter grounded, the K-9 units reassigned. Coleman sat the women down, his tone heavy. "We're not giving up," he said, "but we can't keep this level of resources out here. We'll keep patrols active, follow any new leads. You should go home, get some rest." Sarah shook her head, tears streaming. "I'm not leaving her." Mia and Claire agreed, their faces set. They stayed at the cabin, refusing to abandon the place where Lila had last been seen. The forest stretched out around them, its beauty now a cruel mockery, its silence a weight they couldn't shake. Somewhere in its depths was Lila, or the truth of what had taken her. The Blue Ridge Mountains stood resolute, their peaks shrouded in autumn fog as the weeks turned to months since Lila Harper's disappearance. The cabin, once alive with the laughter of 4 friends, now sat empty, its windows dark, the porch littered with fallen leaves. The Shenandoah Valley's beauty remained unchanged, pine-scented air, the rustle of wind through oaks, the distant gurgle of streams, but it carried a new weight, a quiet menace that lingered like a stain. For Sarah, Mia, and Claire, the forest was no longer a place of escape but a vast, indifferent keeper of secrets. By October, the official search had been scaled back to routine patrols, the sheriff's office citing limited resources and no new leads. Deputy Matt Coleman and Ranger Emily Torres still checked the trails weekly, their faces etched with the frustration of a case that refused to yield answers. The black shoelace and Lila's water bottle, both carefully catalogued, sat in an evidence locker in the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office, their significance unclear. The pickup truck sighting reported by the hiker led nowhere, too vague to trace, no matching vehicles found among locals. The forest had given up nothing more, its depths too vast to conquer. Sarah refused to return to Richmond full-time, renting a small apartment in the nearby town of Luray to stay close to the investigation. She visited the cabin weekly, walking the Ravens Point Loop alone, calling Lila's name until her throat ached. She carried Lila's silver necklace in her pocket, its weight a constant reminder. Mia and Claire, bound by jobs and lives back in the city, came when they could, their weekends filled with searches and meetings with Coleman. The 3 women clung to their bond, their shared grief a lifeline, but the lack of answers frayed their hope. Sarah started a social media campaign, #FindLilaHarper, posting photos of Lila, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her hazel eyes bright with laughter. The campaign spread, amassing thousands of followers, mostly strangers moved by the story of a young woman vanished in the mountains. Online forums buzzed with theories. Lila had fallen into a ravine, succumbed to exposure, or been taken by a predator, human or animal. Amateur sleuths dissected the case, some claiming the shoelace suggested foul play, others arguing it was a simple accident. Sarah read every post, her heart lurching at each new theory, but none brought her closer to Lila. Mia threw herself into organizing community events, her dreamer's energy channeled into action. She arranged a candlelight vigil in Luray 6 months after the disappearance, the town square glowing with hundreds of candles. Locals, hikers and even park staff attended, their faces somber as Mia spoke, her voice breaking. Lila loved these mountains, she said, clutching a photo of Lila at the overlook. She's still out there somewhere. We won't stop looking. The crowd murmured agreement, but the words felt hollow against the silence of the case. Claire, ever the quiet one, coped through her art. She filled sketchbooks with drawings of the Blue Ridge trails, twisted roots, shadowed hollows, the rocky clearing where the water bottle was found. Her sketches were meticulous, almost obsessive, as if capturing the forest details could unlock its secrets. She sent them to Coleman, hoping they might jog a memory or highlight a missed clue, but he only thanked her politely, his eyes tired. A year passed, the anniversary marked by a small gathering at the cabin. Sarah, Mia, and Claire stood at the trailhead, releasing biodegradable lanterns into the dusk, their glow fading into the trees. Sarah's voice was steady but hollow. "We're not giving up, Lila. We'll find you." The promise felt heavier now, weighed down by 12 months of nothing. The case officially went cold that winter, a term that cut Sarah like a blade. Coleman called to explain, his tone heavy with regret. "We're not closing it," he said. "But without new evidence there's only so much we can do. If something turns up, we'll jump on it." Sarah hung up without responding, her anger mixing with despair. She felt betrayed, not by Coleman, but by the mountains themselves, their beauty a cruel mask for whatever had taken Lila. Life moved on, but not for the three women. Sarah quit her job, taking freelance work to stay in Luray, her savings dwindling. Mia's social media posts grew less frequent, her optimism strained. Claire's sketches darkened, the forest in her drawings now a tangle of jagged lines. The hashtag #FindLilaHarper campaign still drew attention, but the comments turned speculative, some cruel. "She probably ran off," one user wrote. "People don't just vanish." Sarah deleted the comment, her hands shaking. 2 years later, a flicker of hope emerged. In the spring of 2027, a hiker went missing in a neighboring county, a 24-year-old man named Ethan Cole. His car was found at a trailhead 30 miles from Lila's cabin, his backpack abandoned nearby. The similarities were uncanny: another experienced hiker, another abrupt disappearance, another trail swallowed by the Blue Ridge. Sarah's phone lit up with messages from Mia and Claire, their group chat alive for the first time in months. Could it be connected? Mia texted, her words laced with urgency. Claire responded with a photo of a news article about Ethan, her caption simple, "Same forest." Sarah drove to the sheriff's office that day, her heart pounding. Coleman met her in the lobby, his face older, his hair grayer. She laid out the parallels, the trailhead, the backpack, the lack of tracks. "It's too similar," she said. "What if it's the same person?" Coleman listened, his expression guarded. "We're looking into it," he said. "But Ethan's case is fresh. Different jurisdiction, different team. We'll share notes, but there's no evidence linking them yet." Sarah pressed, her voice rising. "You can't ignore this. 2 people, same area, same pattern. You have to dig deeper." Torres, who joined them, nodded. "We're cross-referencing everything, vehicles, witnesses, anything overlapping. But Sarah, we need something concrete. A hunch isn't enough." The Ethan Cole case reignited interest in Lila's disappearance. Reporters descended on Luray, their cameras flashing at the cabin, their questions probing. A true crime podcast covered both cases, speculating about a serial predator in the Blue Ridge. The hashtag #FindLilaHarper hashtag trended again, new followers flooding in. Sarah appeared on a local news segment, holding up Lila's necklace, her voice steady despite the tears. "Someone knows something," she said. "Please come forward." But the lead fizzled as quickly as it had flared. Ethan's backpack yielded no clues, and his case, like Lila's, went cold after months of searching. The media moved on, the public's attention waned, and the forest remained silent. Sarah felt the weight of another dead end, her hope crumbling like dry leaves. By the 3rd year, the women's lives had diverged, though their bond held. Sarah stayed in Luray, a fixture at the sheriff's office, her persistence both admired and pitted. Mia returned to Richmond, her event planning business thriving but her heart still tethered to the mountains. Claire moved to a small studio in Charlottesville, her art now exhibited in galleries, each piece a quiet tribute to Lila. One evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the hashtag #FindLilaHarper page. A new comment caught her eye, posted by an anonymous user. Check the old wells in the valley. Hunters used them years ago. Her pulse quickened. She forwarded it to Coleman, who promised to look, but his tone was weary as if chasing another ghost. The comment led nowhere. No wells were found on the map trails and the terrain was too vast to search blindly. Sarah drove to the cabin that weekend, standing at the trailhead as the wind howled through the pines. The forest stretched before her, its beauty unchanged, its secrets unyielding. She clutched Lila's necklace, her voice a whisper. "I'm still here, Lila. I'm not stopping." But the mountains offered no reply, their silence a heavy, endless weight. 4 years had passed since Lila Harper vanished into the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the Shenandoah Valley had reclaimed its quiet beauty, as if the tragedy had never touched its slopes. The pines still whispered in the wind, their scent sharp and unchanging, but for Sarah, Mia and Claire, the forest was a wound that refused to heal. The cabin stood abandoned, its rental listing long removed, the trailhead sign weathered and leaning. The hashtag Find Lila Harper campaign flickered on, sustained by a dwindling group of supporters, but the world had moved on. The women, though, could not. Sarah still lived in Luray, her life a rhythm of freelance work and solitary hikes, her hope worn thin but unbroken. Mia visited monthly, her energy dimmed but her resolve firm. Claire's art, now gaining quiet acclaim, carried the shadow of the mountains in every stroke. The case remained cold, a file buried in the sheriff's office, its only relics a shoelace, a water bottle, and the fading memory of a pickup truck sighting. Yet the forest, vast and secretive, held its secrets close, its silence a wall no search could breach. On a crisp October morning in 2029, a retired botanist named Margaret Ellis wandered a remote stretch of the valley, her border collie Juniper bounding ahead. Margaret, 68, had spent her career studying the region's flora, her days now filled with leisurely hikes to catalog rare plants. She was 2 miles from the Ravens Point Loop, in a seldom visited hollow where the forest thickened into a tangle of laurel and granite. The air was heavy with the musk of decaying leaves, the ground soft underfoot, the silence broken only by Juniper's panting and the crunch of Margaret's boots. Juniper, usually playful, froze near a cluster of ferns, her ears pricked, nose twitching. She began to dig, her paws frantic, unearthing dirt and roots. Margaret called her back, but the dog ignored her, whining as she clawed at the earth. Curious, Margaret approached, her eyes narrowing at the sight of something unnatural amidst the soil, a scrap of green fabric, frayed but unmistakable. Her heart quickened as she knelt, brushing away dirt to reveal more. A torn sleeve, stained and weathered but clearly part of a jacket. Beside it, half buried, was a small leather wallet, its surface cracked but intact. Margaret's hands shook as she opened the wallet. Inside was a faded ID card, the photo blurred but the name clear. Lila Harper. The air seemed to still, the forest's hum fading to a hush. Juniper whined again, her nose nudging a glint of metal. A zipper, attached to a tattered backpack, partially exposed under the ferns. Margaret stepped back, her breath shallow, and pulled out her phone to call the sheriff's office, her signal faint but enough. Shenandoah County Sheriff, the dispatcher answered. "I found something," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "In the woods off Route 612. A wallet, a jacket, belongs to Lila Harper. You need to send someone now." Within an hour, the hollow was a hive of activity. Deputy Matt Coleman arrived first, his face a mix of disbelief and urgency, followed by Ranger Emily Torres and a forensic team from Richmond. Sarah, Mia, and Claire were called, their drive to the site a blur of hope and dread. They stood at the edge of the cordoned-off area, watching as officers marked the scene with yellow tape. Juniper sat by Margaret's side, her tail still, as if sensing the gravity of her discovery. The forensic team worked methodically, their gloved hands extracting the backpack from the soil. It was Lila's, the same one she'd carried on their hike, its straps frayed, its contents damp but preserved. Inside were her journal, its pages swollen but legible, and a small silver keychain shaped like a mountain, a gift from Mia. The green jacket, torn and mud-caked, was carefully bagged, its fabric sending a jolt through Sarah as she recognized its shade. But the wallet was the most chilling find. Lila's ID, her library card, a folded photo of the 4 friends at a college graduation, their smiles frozen in time. Sarah clutched Lila's necklace, her knuckles white. "That's hers," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mia's hand gripped Claire's, tears streaming down her face. Claire stared at the scene, her artist's eye cataloging every detail, the angle of the ferns, the shadow of the trees, the careful hands of the forensic techs, as if drawing it could make sense of the moment. Coleman approached, his expression grim but focused. "This is a big break," he said. "We're sending everything to the lab in Richmond. DNA, soil analysis, the works. We'll know more soon." "Is she?" Sarah couldn't finish, her eyes fixed on the backpack. "We don't know yet," Coleman said gently. "No remains, just her things. But this gives us a new search area. We're bringing in ground-penetrating radar, more dogs. We'll comb this hollow." Torres, studying the site, added, "This spot's remote, off any marked trail. Whoever left this here didn't expect it to be found. Could be a dump site or—" She trailed off, her eyes meeting Coleman's. The women stayed as long as they were allowed, watching the team work under portable floodlights as dusk fell. The forest, once a vast mystery, now felt like it had cracked open, revealing a sliver of truth. Margaret, shaken but composed, recounted Juniper's behavior to the officers. "She just knew," she said, patting the dog's head. "She wouldn't stop digging." That night, the women returned to Sarah's apartment in Luray, unable to face the cabin. They sat in silence, Lila's keychain on the table between them, its silver glinting in the lamplight. Mia broke the quiet, her voice raw. "For years. How did it stay hidden so long?" Claire's hands twitched, itching for her sketchbook. "The forest is good at hiding things," she said softly. "But it can't hide everything forever." Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the necklace. Someone put her things there. Someone who knew that spot. The lab results came 2 weeks later, a call from Coleman that sent Sarah's heart racing. The jacket and backpack tested positive for Lila's DNA, confirming they were hers. But there was more, trace DNA, not Lila's, on the jacket's sleeve. A male profile, partial but enough to run through the Cody's database. The search yielded a hit. A man named Daniel Wade, 42, a part-time landscaper from Luray with a minor record for trespassing years earlier. He'd never been on the radar, his name absent from witness lists, his life unremarkable, a quiet loner who mowed lawns and fixed fences for locals. Sarah's breath caught as Coleman shared the details. "He lives a few miles from the cabin," he said. "Works odd jobs, keeps to himself. We're pulling his records, talking to neighbors. But Sarah, don't jump ahead. This is a lead, not proof." Mia, listening on speakerphone, pressed, "What about the backpack? Was it buried on purpose?" Coleman hesitated. "Looks like it. The soil was disturbed, packed down. Someone tried to hide it. We're searching the area for more." The news electrified the case, dormant for so long. The sheriff's office reopened the file, assigning a new detective, Lisa Nguyen, to work with Coleman and Torres. Nguyen, sharp-eyed and relentless, dug into Wade's history, his jobs, his haunts, his habits. The women, meanwhile, grappled with a mix of hope and fear. The discovery was a lifeline, but it pointed to a darker truth, one they dreaded but couldn't ignore. As the forensic team swept the hollow with radar and cadaver dogs, Sarah stood at the trailhead, her eyes on the distant ridge. The forest was still beautiful, its colors vivid in the autumn light, but it felt different now, a place that had finally spoken, if only in whispers. The question hung heavy: what else was it hiding? The Blue Ridge Mountains stood sentinel, their autumn hues fading into the gray of early November 2029. The Shenandoah Valley, once a place of solace for Lila Harper, now pulsed with renewed purpose. The discovery of her backpack, jacket and wallet in a remote hollow had cracked open the cold case, and the trace DNA pointing to Daniel Wade sent a jolt through the investigation. The forest, with its pine-scented air and shadowed trails, seemed to watch in silence as the sheriff's office mobilized, their focus sharpened by the first real lead in 4 years. Sarah, Mia, and Claire gathered in Sarah's Luray apartment, the small space crowded with tension and hope. Sarah paced, Lila's silver necklace dangling from her fingers, its familiar weight grounding her. Mia sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the hashtag #FindLilaHarper page, where speculation about the new lead was already spreading. Claire sketched the hollow in her notebook, her pencil capturing the ferns and granite with haunting precision, as if drawing could unravel the truth. The women were united in their need for answers, but the shadow of what those answers might reveal loomed large. Deputy Matt Coleman and Detective Lisa Nguyen led the reinvigorated investigation, with Ranger Emily Torres coordinating the ground search. The forensic team's findings had been precise. The trace DNA on Lila's jacket sleeve, skin cells likely from handling, was a partial match to Daniel Wade, enough to warrant scrutiny but not yet a conviction. Cody's had flagged Wade from a trespassing arrest in 2018, when he'd been caught on private land near a hiking trail. At the time it seemed minor, but now it was a thread the team pulled with urgency. Wade, 42, lived in a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Luray, a mile from the Ravens Point Loop trailhead. He was a landscaper known for odd jobs. Mowing lawns, clearing brush, repairing fences for cabins like the one the women had rented. Neighbors described him as quiet, unassuming, a man who kept his lawn tidy and his conversations short. He drove a faded red pickup, the kind that blended into the rural landscape, and spent his evenings at a local bar, nursing a beer alone. To the community he was invisible, just another face in a small town. To the investigators he was now the center of the case. Nguyen dug into Wade's life with a meticulous intensity, pulling records from his employers, phone logs, and bank statements. He'd worked for a property management company that serviced the cabin in 2025, giving him access to the area the week Lila disappeared. His phone records showed no calls the day she vanished, but a gap in activity raised flags. A 3-hour window when his phone was off, unusual for a man who relied on it for work. Nguyen's gut told her this was no coincidence. Coleman and Torres organized surveillance, discreet but constant. A plainclothes deputy parked near Wade's house, noting his routines. Morning coffee on his porch, trips to the hardware store, evening drives to the bar. His behavior was ordinary, almost too perfect, but Nguyen noticed details that chilled her. Wade often lingered near trailheads, his truck parked at odd hours, binoculars in his front seat. He'd been seen watching hikers, his gaze lingering too long on women walking alone. A neighbor mentioned he'd once asked about safe spots in the woods, places no one would find. Sarah, desperate for updates, met Nguyen at the sheriff's office, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "What's next?" she asked, her voice tight. "You've got his DNA. That's enough, right?" Nguyen, her dark eyes steady, shook her head. "It's a start, but it's circumstantial. The DNA's partial, could be from casual contact. We need more, something tying him directly to Lila or the site." The team expanded the search in the hollow where Margaret Ellis and her dog Juniper had found Lila's belongings. Cadaver dogs swept the area, their noses low, while ground-penetrating radar scanned for disturbances in the soil. The hollow was remote, accessible only by an overgrown logging road, the kind only locals or park staff would know. Torres, who'd mapped the area for years, noted its isolation. "This isn't a place you stumble on," she said to Coleman. "Whoever chose it knew it was hidden." A week into the renewed search, the dogs hit on a faint scent, leading to a dry, stone-lined well half-collapsed and buried under vines. It was one of the old hunting wells mentioned in the anonymous online tip years earlier, overlooked during the initial search due to its obscurity. The forensic team descended, their tools clinking as they cleared debris. Inside they found nothing, no remains, no clothing, but the well's depth and seclusion sent a chill through the team. It was a perfect hiding place, its water long dried up, its walls steep and silent. Nguyen's focus on Wade intensified. She interviewed his co-workers, one of whom recalled him borrowing a shovel in the summer of 2025, claiming it was for a landscaping job. Another mentioned his fascination with the park's trails, how he'd talk about secret spots he'd found while working. The pieces were small, fragmented, but they were building a picture of a man who knew the forest's hidden corners. On November 15th, Nguyen and Coleman decided to move. They obtained a warrant to search Wade's property, based on the DNA and his proximity to the cabin. The raid was swift, executed at dawn when Wade was home. Deputies surrounded his house, their radios crackling as they entered. Wade, bleary-eyed in a flannel shirt, didn't resist, his expression calm but unreadable. Sarah, Mia, and Claire waited at the sheriff's office, their nerves frayed as Nguyen called with updates. The search yielded a trove of unsettling finds. In Wade's garage, tucked behind stacks of gardening tools, was a box of photographs. Dozens of women, some taken from a distance on trails, others at local trailheads. Among them was a single photo of Lila, standing at the Ravens Point overlook, her green jacket bright against the sunset. Sarah gasped when Nguyen showed it to her later, her hands shaking. "That's from our hike," she said. He was there. More damning was a journal, its pages filled with Wade's cramped handwriting. Entries described his walks in the forest, his fascination with watching hikers, and cryptic references to keeping things safe. One entry, dated the day after Lila's disappearance, read, "Took care of the green one. No one will find her spot." Nguyen's pulse raced as she read it, the words a chilling confirmation. Wade was brought in for questioning, his demeanor eerily detached. In the interrogation room, he sat across from Nguyen and Coleman, his hands folded, his eyes fixed on the table. "I don't know anything about that girl," he said, his voice flat. "I take pictures sometimes. I like the trails." Nguyen leaned forward, her voice sharp. Your DNA's on her jacket, Daniel. Your truck was seen near the trailhead. You wrote about a green one. Explain that. Wade's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his silence a wall. The interrogation stretched for hours, Ingwin pressing, Coleman watching for cracks. Finally Wade muttered, "You've got nothing. A jacket doesn't mean I did anything." The women, watching through a one-way mirror at Nguyen's invitation, felt a mix of rage and helplessness. Mia's fists clenched, her voice a whisper. He's lying. He knows where she is. Claire's eyes never left Wade, her sketchbook forgotten, as if memorizing his face could force the truth. Sarah gripped Lila's necklace, her heart pounding with the need for closure. The evidence was mounting, but it wasn't enough for a charge. The DNA was partial, the journal suggestive but not conclusive. Nguyen needed more, a confession, a location, or Lila's remains. The team doubled down, searching Wade's known haunts, rechecking the hollow and the well. The dogs circled the well again, their whines insistent, but the radar showed nothing beneath the stone. As the days passed, the investigation teetered on the edge of a breakthrough. Wade was released pending further evidence, his house under watch, his movements tracked. Sarah, Mia, and Claire returned to the cabin for the first time in years, standing at the trailhead as the wind howled through the pines. The forest was still beautiful, its secrets tantalizingly close to being revealed. But one question burned above all: where was Lila? The Blue Ridge Mountains stood timeless, their peaks cloaked in the soft gray of late November 2029, the air sharp with the scent of pine and frost. The Shenandoah Valley, once a haven for Lila Harper, now bore the weight of a truth clawing its way to the surface. The discovery of Lila's belongings in a remote hollow and the mounting evidence against Daniel Wade had reignited the investigation, but the forest still held its final secret: Lila's fate. For Sarah, Mia, and Claire, the past 4 years had been a crucible of grief and persistence, and now, as the case teetered on the edge of resolution, they braced for answers that might break them. Detective Lisa Nguyen and Deputy Matt Coleman pressed forward, their focus laser-sharp on Daniel Wade. The landscaper's house, with its hidden box of photographs and cryptic journal, had painted a chilling picture of a man whose quiet life masked a predator's instincts. The partial DNA on Lila's jacket, the photo of her at the Ravens Point Overlook, and the journal entry about the green one were damning, but not enough for a conviction. Nguyen needed a confession or physical evidence tying Wade to Lila's fate. The forest, with its endless trails and hidden corners, was their last hope. The breakthrough came on a cold morning, 2 weeks after Wade's interrogation. Nguyen, relentless, had secured a second warrant to search his property, this time focusing on a shed behind his house, overlooked in the initial raid. Inside, buried under a tarp, they found a locked metal box. Inside were more photographs, dozens of women, some local, some from neighboring counties, all taken on trails or in town. Among them were 3 of Lila, one showing her entering the cabin the night before she vanished. A folded map, marked with red XS, pinpointed remote spots in the Blue Ridge, including the hollow where Lila's backpack was found and the dry well nearby. The most chilling find was a small, tarnished silver necklace. Lila's, identical to the one Sarah carried, its mountain-shaped pendant glinting in the dim light. Nguyen's hands shook as she bagged it, her voice steady as she radioed Coleman. "We've got her necklace." He kept it. The evidence was enough to arrest Wade, this time for suspicion of murder. In the interrogation room, Nguyen laid out the photos, the map, the necklace, her eyes boring into Wade's. He sat, slouched, his calm facade cracking, sweat beading on his brow. "You kept trophies, Daniel," Nguyen said, her voice like steel. "You marked the hollow. You took her necklace. Where is she?" Wade's gaze flickered, his hands clenching. "I didn't kill her," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. After hours of silence, Nguyen leaned closer, her tone softer, probing. "You watched her, didn't you? You followed her. Tell me what happened, Daniel. Give her family peace." The dam broke. Wade's voice was low, detached, as if recounting a dream. "She was perfect," he said. "Always hiking, always alone. I saw her at the overlook, laughing with her friends. I just wanted to know her." His words grew halting, then chillingly clear. He'd followed Lila that morning, watching her leave the cabin for an early hike. He'd approached her on the trail, offering to show her a secret spot, near the hollow. When she refused, his obsession turned to panic. "She screamed," he said, his eyes distant. "I didn't mean to. I just grabbed her. She fell, hit her head." Wade described dragging Lila's body to the dry well, a place he'd found years ago while clearing brush. He'd hidden her backpack and jacket in the hollow, thinking the forest would bury his secret. The necklace he kept, a twisted memento of his fixation. He insisted it was an accident, but his journal told a darker story. Entries hinting at other women, other secret spots, suggesting Lila wasn't his only victim. Nguyen pressed for the well's exact location and Wade, defeated, gave it up, a half-mile from the hollow hidden by a thicket of laurel. The forensic team, led by Ranger Emily Torres, descended on the site that afternoon, their equipment clanking as they cleared vines and stones. Sarah, Mia, and Claire waited at the sheriff's office, their hands clasped, their breaths shallow. When Torres called, her voice was heavy. "We found her." The well, dry and deep, held Lila's remains, carefully preserved by the cool, airless environment. Forensic techs recovered her bones, still clad in fragments of her black leggings, her green jacket's zipper tangled in the debris. A small, silver ring, a gift from her father, was found among the remains, its presence a final confirmation. Sarah wept when shown the ring, her fingers tracing its edges, while Mia and Claire held each other, their grief a tidal wave. The recovery brought closure, but it was bittersweet. Lila was gone, her life ended in a moment of terror, her love for the mountains betrayed by the very place she cherished. Wade's confession led to charges of second-degree murder, with Nguyen building a case for additional victims based on his journal and map. The photographs suggested a pattern, and the team began cross-referencing missing persons cases across the region, a grim task that hinted at a serial predator who'd used the forest's vastness as his shield. The community reeled as news of Wade's arrest spread. Luray, a town that prided itself on its quiet beauty, grappled with the revelation that one of its own had hunted among them. The hashtag Find Lila Harper campaign exploded with posts, some celebrating justice, others mourning the truth. A local group organized a safety initiative, installing trail cameras and emergency call boxes along the Blue Ridge trails. The cabin's owners, shaken, donated the property to a conservation trust, unable to rent it again. Sarah, Mia, and Claire planned a memorial at the Ravens Point Overlook, where Lila had stood 4 years earlier, her smile bright against the sunset. On a clear December day they gathered with family, friends and locals, the valley stretching below, its beauty undimmed but forever changed. Sarah spoke, her voice steady despite the tears. "Lila loved this place," she said, holding the silver necklace. "She saw its heart, its freedom. We'll carry that for her." Mia placed a small stone cairn at the overlook, each rock chosen from the trails Lila had hiked. Claire unveiled a sketch, now framed, of Lila at the overlook, her auburn hair catching the light. The crowd stood in silence, the wind carrying their grief into the trees. As they drove back to Luray, Sarah reflected on the role of chance. Margaret Ellis and her dog Juniper, a random walk in a forgotten hollow, a buried backpack that broke the case open. The forest had hidden Lila for years, but it couldn't hide her forever. Justice, fragile and late, had come through persistence and luck, a reminder of how thin the line between loss and closure could be. The women returned to their lives, forever marked. Sarah stayed in Luray, finding solace in advocacy, working with the safety initiative. Mia poured her energy into her business, her laughter returning in small doses. Claire's art took on new depth, her exhibitions a tribute to Lila's spirit. The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed in the distance, their beauty a paradox, both sanctuary and secret keeper, a place of solace and sorrow. For Lila, they were home, and now, in the quiet of the overlook, her memory lived on, carried by those who refused to let her fade.